and we are live.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining this afternoon. My name is Kendall Smith. I'm Governor Scott's Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs. And for those that I haven't had a chance to connect with personally over the past 2 weeks, I want to say that you, your friends, your family, and your properties have been minimally impacted by this recent storm. We wanted to host this briefing for you all today on the flood response and recovery. We are going to give you a lot of information. And so I want to reiterate that most of what we're going to share is either online or we've put out in press releases. So if you hear something that piques your interest, depending on your constituent questions, feel free to connect with myself or another member of the administration after, and we can follow up and give you more details on it, because there is a lot that we're about to go through in the next hour and 15 minutes. Thank you all for again carving the time out. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Governor Scott. Governor, are you connected?
I think I am, Kendall.
Yes, there you are.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for taking the time to join this call. I know there's a lot to cover this afternoon, so I'll try to be brief. But I thought it was important to share directly with you the message I've been sending to the Vermonters you serve, which is we have a long road ahead of us, but we will get through this and we'll do it together. To be clear, I know how devastating this flood was and the damage it caused in many parts of the state. I've actually seen it myself on the ground in Barrie, for instance, where a woman whose mobile home, all of her possessions were destroyed, went into her home to look around and came out clinging to a jar of peanut butter because it was one of the only things left that was salvageable. And just think about that for a minute. A jar of peanut butter was now her prized possession. And in Hardwick, where the only motel in town and a bridge from the Memorial Valley Rail Trail, two symbols of economic revitalization for the community, were literally both torn apart by flood water. And the wastewater systems severely compromised and shut down in places like Ludlow, Johnson, and Hardwick. And the small businesses gutted in downtowns like Montpelier, Barrie, Ludlow, Waterbury, Johnson, Hardwick, and so many more throughout the state. Several of you have been there with me as we've heard the heartache and seen the destruction. So I know you understand the incredible challenge ahead. And I want to assure you, me and my team, along with the State Emergency Operations Center and many of our partners are doing everything we can to help our communities. For the last 10 days, we've been focused on the emergency, prioritizing life and safety. And now, as we shift further into the recovery phase, we want to help get homes and businesses clean and dry, remove the debris, and make sure they're applying for the federal recovery money we know they're going to need. There's no doubt we'll lean on our federal partners in this work, and they've been here as well. We have over 300 members of FEMA on the ground with us in Vermont. And me and my team are in contact with our congressional delegation and the White House to make sure they know what Vermont needs. And by the way, they've all been great to deal with thus far. This work includes trying to get more counties declared under the major disaster declaration, which we're pushing for every single day. And this is where we could use your help. What we need your constituents to do right now is report their damage to 211. I know it's difficult for those who are dealing with flooded homes to think about filing a report somewhere, and that some may not want to ask for the help or think they deserve it. Many have told me, I don't want to take money away from those who need it. But just know, this is really, really important. We've got to report the damage to 211. And it's not just for the homeowners themselves, but because it helps all of the neighbors and all of Vermont. And remember, this is damage to home or property. So this includes homes, garages, basements, equipment, vehicles. It's really, really broad. This reporting will help FEMA make its determinations about eligibility for individual assistance. So it's especially important in counties that haven't been declared. If there's one takeaway from this meeting, it's that we need your help spreading the word that people should report their damage. So for those of you representing Orleans County today, listening in, pay attention to this. We had two pieces of good news today, and I know Will Roy will be talking about that as well. But Orleans is, I think, next on the list, and we need your help in getting to the finish line. At the same time, all this work is happening. We've got to make sure the wheels of government keep turning, which we are doing. So even as many state offices, including ours, along with the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the Treasurer, all of us have been affected, and we're all displaced. In fact, we're up in the Dill building up at Knapp Airport, across from Knapp Airport. But here's the point. We're all in this together, and it's going to take all of us putting politics aside and pulling in the same direction to see this through. Just like we did in Irene and the pandemic, we've already seen Vermonters stepping up, neighbors helping neighbors muck out their homes, clean out their storefronts, former state employees who've left state government coming back to help lend their expertise and give us more hands on deck, people donating to recovery funds, and so much more. This is the Vermont way. It's why I know we'll get through this. And once again, show why we're Vermont strong and tough too. So with that, I'll now turn it over to fellow Vermonters. I've got to get back on the road. This is General Will Roy, Federal Coordinating Officer from FEMA. So take care and remember, 211, get those reports in. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. I appreciate that. I'm just going to be a thumbs up. Am I good to go for a hearing? You hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. So not only am I your federal disaster recovery officer here, federal coordinating officer here, but I'm also a fellow resident of Vermont. I live in Jericho. So it's a blessing to be here to assist in every way we can. I want to give you a short rundown of what we have for information as of today for the work that's being done. As the governor said, we have 386 people already in Vermont. In fact, we had people postured in Burlington before we actually get the declaration from the president. We have disaster survivor assistance teams out in the field. As of today, they visited over 3,300 homes and 199 businesses. We have
joined the meeting.
We have 6 mobile registration intake centers throughout the state, and we have supporting the multi-agency resource centers that the state has stood up. Our disaster survivor assistance teams are in 12 of the communities. And we have just established 2 of our disaster resource centers. One will be in Waterbury, the other one is in Rutland, and we've had people come in 12 minutes after we opened them. The disaster recovery centers are where people can go either to sign up for assistance, or they can go there to help with assistance letters that they get from the agency. A key point here is sometimes when they fill out their application for assistance, there'll be paperwork missing, and they'll get a letter that is unfortunately reads confusingly. And so we have those resource centers where people can go and ask questions. They can also call online as well, or go online. As far as individuals signing up.
Representative Mary Morrissey from Bennington.
Join the meeting.
As far as people signing up for help, as of last evening, over 2,100 people had registered for assistance, including 131 in the yet to be declared counties. We have approved $1.5 million for assistance and actually have delivered $1.1 million in assistance. The average per recipient is $5,700. We have a request to inspect 1,317 homes, and of those we have completed inspections of 389. Just this morning, we delivered a bulk water to Marshfield in support of the state's other missions. The president announced today also the addition of both Caledonia and Orange counties for individual assistance, as well as authorizing all types of public assistance work in Bennington, Orange, and Washington counties. For those counties that have not been declared yet for either public assistance or individual assistance, the assessments continue on as we sit here right now to take a look at the totality of the damage. And the governor alluded to the 211 as a critical part of that. We also listened to the governor. Long-term recovery is critical. So we already have a federal disaster recovery officer who's focused on long-term recovery for Vermont, already on the ground, and he will work with the state disaster recovery officer. And I have to leave for this call to go to one for the congressional delegation. But on the line, we have subject matter experts for both our individual assistance and public assistance if you have any detailed questions about our programs. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you here today. And I'll turn it over to whomever the host.
Thank you for joining us, Will. We appreciate you making the time and look forward to hearing from a few of your colleagues later on here in the hour. Deputy Commissioner Batesy, are you with us from Public Safety to kind of give an overview of the response thus far?
I am, Kendall. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I'm Dan Batesy. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Public Safety and have been one of the folks working in the State Emergency Operations Center since the beginning. As you know, the weather system began the weekend after the 4th of July, the Friday, the 7th of July.
Representative Mary Morrissey from Bennington.
Join the meeting.
We had a number of events that we were already working with, and then came into the heavy rain that really hit us hard. We saw rain, we saw severe storms, and then, of course, as you know, we're followed that with flooding and mudslides. And we've been dealing with all of those issues ever since. Although there are very few communities that didn't see damage from these storms, the hardest hit areas are the areas around our rivers, the Winooski River, the Moyle River, Otter Creek, and in particular, the access to the Green Mountains, including areas like Ludlow, Woodstock, Chelsea. We've also seen regional flooding in other areas in Orleans County, Orange County, and Chittenden County. Again, as I said, there are very few places that haven't been hard hit and are feeling the effects. We opened the State Emergency Operations Center on Sunday the 9th, and since that date have sustained a fully staffed 24-hour activation with literally hundreds of folks contributing to this response. We communicate daily with local emergency managers. We offer a wide package of resources and communication with municipal leaders, including a daily call to municipalities to update progress. We also coordinate the efforts of all of the agencies of government and a wide assortment of non-governmental organizations like the Red Cross and other volunteer agencies and groups. We're hoping that you can help us amplify some of the processes that are very important to this response, and in particular with communities who have needs. We're hoping that you can help them understand that the process for asking for assistance through the SEOC has to come through that municipality's designated emergency manager. Our state emergency management plan has emergency managers designated for each community. Those communities elect their emergency manager. They designate their emergency manager, that is. And what we're hoping for is that all messaging to the State Emergency Operations Center will come through that emergency manager. When it doesn't, when it comes from other sources, it just creates chaos and oftentimes duplicates and certainly slows down a lot of the requests. So as you're hearing issues from your constituents and as you're hearing needs out there, please focus them through those communities' emergency managers. And certainly, if any of you have any questions on that, I'd be glad to discuss the process. I'm also going to amplify the governor's message of how important it is to communicate any damage to 211. I won't go into any more detail on that. He already spoke about it, but it's going to be very important for our reimbursement process and to make sure that we are optimizing the help of the federal government. I also want to acknowledge that our response has already had an outpouring of assistance from other states. We've received swiftwater rescue teams from North Carolina, Virginia, New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Michigan. We've also received state emergency operations center support from Louisiana, Florida, and Connecticut. And we certainly appreciate the willingness of our neighbors to step up on our behalf in this difficult time. In addition to those offers of support and assistance from other states, we've received visits from FEMA Director Criswell, Federal Highway Administrator Bott, and Secretary of Transportation Buttigieg. Our governor's office is in regular and direct contact with the White House and federal partners, and I will again reiterate, as the governor said, they've been very good to us and have been really terrific resources throughout the storm. We'll continue to operate the State Emergency Operations Center to coordinate response, and our role is really shifting, I hope, at least with the weather, as the weather calms down, from that of life safety and response and coordinating resources for emergent purposes to more recovery purposes. But we will be in it until there's no longer a need for us to be in it. So we'll continue to be here. And if any of your constituents have needs or requests, we'll be glad to serve them. And that's all I have. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Dan. Secretary Flynn.
Good afternoon, everybody. I too am joining you from the Dill facility across from the Berlin airport. I'm going to just go through the cascading series of events up until today as it relates to state-owned infrastructure. Let me begin by saying that on an everyday basis, 24/7, 365, the AOT Transportation Management Center collects information from our many sources, updates 511, monitors all of our AOT trucks and mobile radios statewide, and works with the Vermont State Police Dispatch and alerts AOT regional, district, and garage level personnel of any emerging or immediate situations requiring AOT response. For this series of storm events, the extended stretch of severe weather, as you heard, began late afternoon on Friday, July 7th, striking the southwest region first. Heavy rainfall caused a large landslide on Route 4 near the Killington Skyship Base Lodge, ultimately closing Route 4 for 4 days. In that same July 7th storm, Route 100 in West Bridgewater also saw major flooding, and Bridge 116 on that route was heavily damaged. Nearby culverts were blown out, and as a result of today, one lane of Route 100 from Bridge 116 north to the Route 4 intersection remains significantly damaged, and Route 4 remains closed. Route 100 remains closed from Route 4 to Route 100A. I was there yesterday, actually. The governor and I toured both Route 4 and Route 100 sites on Saturday, July 8th, that following day of the initial event. We met with AOT, ANR, and contractor crews that were on site and had been there since 3 o'clock the day before. Beginning the next day on July 9th, which was Sunday, we learned of more incoming weather forecasted for later that day. AOT launched its scripted statewide strategy to respond as and where necessary, and the Transportation Incident Command Center, we call the TIC, was officially activated on Sunday, July 9th. The TIC's purpose is to coordinate and manage AOT statewide, regional, and district response efforts and support any relevant missions directed by the SCOC. Also on Sunday, July 9th, due to the track of the inbound weather system, AOT activated its Southwest Regional Command and placed the other 4 statewide regional commands on standby status. District staff across the state began patrolling their respective roadways as the storm system began in the Southwest region. 36 hours of steady rain followed, resulting in major transportation impacts across the state of Vermont. The majority of transportation infrastructure damage occurred in the Southwest, the Southeast, and the capital regions. There were reports of as much as 9 inches of rain in some places, although I don't know if that is official. Damage across these regions included significant washouts to roads, rail lines, and bridges. As you heard Dan mention, there were numerous landslides and mudslides. Multiple roadways and rail lines were under several feet of water and sustained continuous flooding. AOT crews responded to specific sites as information came in. Very early Monday morning, the 10th, immediate initial priorities and immediate order of initial response were established and communicated to all 5 regions, 9 districts, and 60 garages statewide. They were as follows. The immediate initial priorities were life safety, stranded employees, stranded equipment, material and supply chains that might be impacted, contractor and consultant availability, and immediate partner agency or department needs. Our immediate order of initial kinetic response, meaning actually doing things, moving, was the national highway system. Number 1, major east and west routes followed that. Key routes to and from hospitals and critical resources, feeder routes,
Join the meeting.
and towns. At the height of the series of storms, 136 state roads were closed or partially closed. I emphasize state roads. I do not have a complete picture statewide of the town impact, but 136 state roads were closed. As of this morning, 9 state roads remain closed. 10 state roads are partially open to 1 lane. 117 state roads have been fully reopened since the beginning of this event. Like many, the crews at AOT have been working literally day and night. 3 bridges were severely compromised and 1 in Vershire was totally destroyed. 4 state bridges remain closed today. Temporary bridges have been installed or are en route to be installed. AOT bridge inspections began on July 11th. In the last 10 days, AOT has inspected 375 state and town-owned bridges. 37 performed just yesterday. As you know, AOT owns 10 state airports. They are all open, undamaged, and functioning. The Knapp State Airport in Berlin, across the street from where I'm speaking to you, is supporting FEMA, urban search and rescue efforts, and military operations. AOT owns 2 dams. They are the Lake Perrin Dam in Bennington and the Jones Mill Dam in Brandon. There are no issues with either of those dams. Rail. Both the Amtrak Vermonter and the Ethan Allen have resumed passenger operations. The Ethan Allen, however, remains susceptible to the Otter Creek's responsiveness to rain. The Green Mountain Railroad, Rutland to Bellas Falls, remains fully closed with significant damage sites at this time, in particular in the Wallingford and Ludlow areas. The line from Ludlow south may be the first stretch of the Green Mountain to reopen. Vermont Rail Systems and their contractors are working feverishly to repair the line and to restore service. The Washington County Railroad, Montpelier to Websterville, is also heavily impacted and also remains fully closed. A large railroad contractor is present on scene to conduct repairs. AOT facilities. Our regional central garage facility in Berlin, across from the Wayside Diner, was heavily damaged in the flooding. I was down there at 2 o'clock on Tuesday morning, and there was 5 or 6 feet of water cascading across Route 302. I have videos. It was stunning. This has fully displaced our entire maintenance repair facility and staff. It has fully displaced our District 6 staff, and it has fully displaced the technical training branch and local road staff, approximately 50 employees, and the facilities have been significantly damaged. Our Woodstock garage was flooded, and our Londonderry and Ludlow garages were completely isolated for several days. All of those facilities are back online. So the current situation is the following roads remain closed: Vermont 12 in Montpelier, Vermont 302 in Berry City, Vermont 100, as I mentioned, in Bridgewater, Vermont 131 in Cavendish, Vermont 113 in Vershire, Vermont 110 in Chelsea, Vermont 30 in Jamaica. The I-91 northbound ramp to 89 southbound in Hartford is closed, and Vermont 14 in Williamstown is currently closed. The following roads are partially open: Vermont 12 in Berlin, Vermont 110 in Washington, US 4 in Bridgewater, Vermont 107 in Stockbridge, Vermont 100 in Jamaica, Vermont 110 at Bridge 13 in Chelsea, Vermont 103 in Proctorsville, Vermont 103 in Chester, Vermont 125 in Ripton, and Vermont 15 in Hardwick. I want to cautiously say that we are anticipating 4 to 5 weeks of ongoing repairs remaining on some of the closed roads I mentioned, not all. On many of the closed roads I mentioned, while it is too soon to predict with exact specificity today when they'll open, you should see many improvements and positive changes very soon. But be prepared for some of the roads that are still closed, and possibly some of the rail that is still closed, that this will be the situation for weeks to come, perhaps 3 to 4 and maybe 5 on the outset at some of the most damaged roads. That's what I have at this point, and I believe I'm handing it off to Secretary Clauser.
Thanks, Joe. Good afternoon, everyone. Despite the continued rain today, we are starting to transition from response to recovery. So I want to take a few minutes to talk high level and generally about some of those efforts. The governor issued an executive order on July 9th, and several addenda over the course of the last week focused on temporary regulatory relief and other mechanisms to aid in Vermont's response and recovery efforts. Areas like temporary licensing for essential professionals like architects, electricians, security services, and pharmacists, and more, extending tax filing deadlines, and temporarily waiving certain permitting requirements. In addition to the executive order, we are working hard within state government to streamline contracting processes, to quickly access services and commodities required for flood response, to bring impacted buildings and services back online, or providing alternate space for our employees like we are all here today at DIL, so that government operations can continue, to redeploy staff to the SEOC or other areas of need within state government, and much more. As Secretary Curley discussed at the press conference earlier today, we are, as we speak, also pulling together details for a $20 million grant program for business emergency gap assistance to businesses to help them with immediate needs so they can work towards reopening their doors and businesses. Secretary Curley will tell you more about this in the business recovery portion later in this briefing, but we are also working with the Treasurer's Office, LVCT, SBA, and FEMA to identify needs, get relief out to those who need it, and to try to address gaps in funding for all those who have been impacted. And I know that we are running a bit tight on time, so I'll hand it back to Kendall to kind of walk us walk the rest of you through what those resources are and give you some more information.
Perfect. Thanks you so much, Secretary Clauser. Right now, we're going to talk a little bit about individual recovery resources. And I'd like to ask Chelsea Smith from FEMA, if you're on, to talk a little bit about individual assistance and how Vermonters can be accessing that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kendall. So as mentioned, my name is Chelsea Smith. I am the Individual Assistance Branch Director for the FEMA Declaration for Vermont. I am honored to speak to you guys today and I'm excited to share additional information about FEMA's Individuals and Households program for you. FEMA's Individuals and Households program is a grant program to support uninsured or underinsured losses due to disaster. This assistance can be used for home repairs, rent support for displaced individuals while repairs are made, and for other disaster-related expenses such as medical, dental, funeral expenses, moving and storage, and personal property losses to include accessibility items. This assistance is available to eligible primary residents and renters in Chittenden, Lamoille, Rutland, Washington, Windham, Windsor, and then in addition today, as FCO Roy mentioned, Orange and Caledonia counties. For those that have previously registered, but were not in the designated counties initially, those registrations will be processing and there is no additional action needed from the registrant. We are encouraging applicants who may have insurance to move forward with those claims. Do not wait. Do not wait on cleanup. FEMA cannot duplicate benefits, and so that is why it is essential to move forward with any potential insurance claims. FEMA will be taking applications through September 12th of 2023. These applications can be completed at disasterassistance.gov, through the FEMA application, and at 1-800-621-FEMA or 3362. Access is also available using the 711 relay and with translation services if that is something that is needed. This is also the number for the FEMA helpline. So an applicant who may have already received an inspection from FEMA and received a letter describing their assistance, if they have questions, that is the same number they would call with those questions. And again, that is 1-800-621-FEMA or 3362. In addition, FEMA staff have been supporting the multi-agency resource centers, the business recovery center locations, and now have 2 recovery center locations at the Waterbury Armory and the ASA Bloomer building in Rutland. And then we're going door to door in communities as well. Recovery centers also have assisted communication devices for those that may need support. And FEMA staff do have access to virtual relay services if those are needed. All of the FEMA staff have badges and they should be visible and can be requested to be viewed as the person is communicating with FEMA. To date, as mentioned, FEMA has received 1,971 valid registrations for assistance, and those are the ones at this point that are moving forward. That number will be updated tomorrow to also include the non-designated areas that have now become designated. So we do expect that to grow. Once a person registers for assistance, the next step is the FEMA inspection. This is not like a typical inspection for a building permit. This is strictly to go out and to look at those damages to the home that would potentially be eligible for federal assistance. It will be scheduled with the applicant, so they should know that the inspector is on their way. Someone in the household 18 years and older has to be there, and they will work with the applicant on those requirements just to make sure somebody is home and able to walk them through the damages. For those that are starting cleanup, we are saying, please take pictures of those damages, save your receipts, save any damage contractor estimates that they are receiving, so that if the inspector has questions, that would be the time to work with them. Once an inspection has occurred, an award can be made to the applicant based on those damages. And to date, over $1.1 million in assistance has been distributed to the Vermont impacted households. And that will continue to grow as well as more people register and as we do have, with these additional designations. Thank you, Kendall.
Thank you so much. Carl from the SBA, are you on?
I am indeed. Yes. Thank you very much. We have a couple of programs or a couple of facets to our program, which is basically a low interest loan program to get you the money that you won't be getting from other sources, be that insurance, FEMA grants, or whatever. Right now, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the program as it applies to homeowners and renters. We have money available up to $40,000 for personal property for either homeowners or renters, up to $200,000 for real estate damage for homeowners, and the interest rates can be as low as 2.5%. The terms for repayment can go as long as 30 years, and the first year is deferred. You don't have to make a payment until a year after you close the note, and that year does not have any interest attached either. So that's the real high-level overview for homeowners and renters. The limits are different for businesses and such, which we'll get on to later, and we'll talk a little more detail as we get further along in this. So I appreciate the opportunity to bring that up, and I want to turn it over to Dan Lorick at FEMA to talk about public assistance.
Thank you, Carl. My name is Dan Larch. I'm the Public Assistance Branch Chief for FEMA Region 1. FEMA's Public Assistance Program provides reimbursement grants to states, local governments, tribal governments, as well as certain private nonprofits such as universities, hospitals, for cost of responding to a disaster. So their emergency protective measures, as well as the cost of repairing or replacing damaged public infrastructure, such as roads, bridges, and other things of that nature. Communities can start to apply through FEMA's grants portal website. This is the same portal that they would have applied for assistance during COVID-19. If they have any problems accessing the grants portal, they can either reach out to the Vermont Emergency Management Agency or can contact our hotline at 866-337-8448. Thank you, Kendall.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to transition to business recovery resources for a few minutes. Secretary Curley, are you still on?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Lindsay Curley. I'm the Secretary of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. I wanted to share with you that our team at ACCD, as we call ourselves, has been working hand in hand with local economic development officials, the Small Business Administration, and FEMA to understand and share and communicate the federal programs that are available to assist our businesses in their recovery efforts. We'll continue to do this in the days, weeks, and months ahead and communicate the latest from the federal level as we hear more. In order to try to bring some clarity to what is available to business owners during this disaster, Carl Dombeck, who you just heard of from the SBA disaster team, will take us through what is available in terms of federal economic relief related to the disaster for businesses. But before I toss it to him again, I just wanted to share that you may have heard our announcement this morning, but today we're really pleased to announce that we're working to stand up a business assistance grant program. The GAP assistance program will be administered by the Department of Economic Development and provide $20 million directly to impacted businesses and not-for-profits who suffered physical damage due to the severe flooding, and it'll come in the form of grants. The program is still under development, and the specifics to the program will be released next week. Business owners can expect grants to support demonstrated losses to their physical space and replacements of inventory, machinery, equipment, and supplies. Again, this program is still being developed and more details will come as we have them early next week. I also wanted to take a really quick second to promote our newsletter, which is where you can go and sign up for the latest updates from ACCD and promote that we are having a business-specific webinar today with FEMA and SBA at 4 o'clock. So if you're looking for more information on that, you can find the link on our website at accd.vermont.gov. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Carl to help explain what federal economic recovery resources are available at this time for business owners and how they can access those resources. Carl, thank you.
Well, thank you, Lindsay. Once again, I would recommend that everyone affected by this disaster, whether you're a homeowner, renter, or business, register with FEMA. Even though FEMA will tell you it has no grants for businesses, it's important because, on the other hand, FEMA is also the coordinator of a number of programs that are put on by states, localities, regions, and they may have some programs that come along down the road that don't exist even today. If you register, they will know where to reach you. If you don't, they won't. So it's as simple as that. Again, like with homeowners and renters, our programs are low-interest loan programs. For businesses, we have two facets. One is for physical damage. The other is for economic injury. If you have physical damage, surely you have some economic injury that goes along with that. But even if you don't have physical damage, you could well be economically impacted. If, for example, your business was at the crest of the road, and no water got to it, but people couldn't get to you, you could have an economic impact. So by all means, apply for that assistance. It can go up to $2 million, and that is based on need. So if you're a small shop, you probably won't qualify for that, but if you're a larger operation, you could. And that is for either physical damage, economic injury, or some combination of the two. For businesses, the interest rate for this disaster is 4%. As I mentioned, the same thing is true for homes and renters. It can go as long as 30 years on the repayment, and the interest rates are very favorable. They're structured to help make recovery affordable. The best thing to do is get the process started. We know you have other priorities right now, particularly businesses, getting them mucked out and cleaned up so you can get back to business, but we are here to help with that. And by all means, let us see what we can do for you to get you the money you need to get back to where you were in, let's say, late June. I have the privilege, and I guess, turning it over to the Agriculture Secretary, Mr. Tebbetts, to talk about what's available for farms. Before I do that, let me mention, if you are a farmer and your home was damaged, your personal property was damaged, you are not excluded from an SBA loan. We can't help with the crop portion of your farm operations, but we could certainly look at helping you if your home and personal property were damaged. So please don't exclude yourselves. Apply as well. And sorry, I didn't mean to step on you, Mr. Tebbetts. Please take it.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anson Tebbetts with the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. Of course, you've all heard that agriculture has been impacted by this historic flood. And I just want to run down a few things and a few pockets. I would encourage everyone to visit our webpage. We've got a number of resources available, whether it's reporting crop losses, whether it's about produce safety, whether it's about making donations or volunteers. And it's really a nice resource page all in one place to guide you through that. Just to give you an up-to-date on the sort of where we're at, let's begin with some reporting that's been done already. Again, we're encouraging everyone to report to 211 about damage, but also if you're a farmer and you have crop losses, to report those losses to the United States Department of Agriculture through FSA, the Farm Services Agency. And to date, we have about, as of Friday morning, we have about 9,400 acres of land that's been impacted by this flood. And that's spread across about 200 farmers. Those are preliminary figures, but they're also very important. Governor Scott has written to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the secretary down there, Secretary Vilsack, asking for a declaration just for agriculture because it's been so severely impacted. If we get that declaration, if the numbers come together, that will open up more resources through USDA, through FSA, or through NRCS, or through rural development. So it's really important that our farm community continue to report those losses to FSA. And it was across just about every county in Vermont. Just to give you an idea, even in Chittenden County, where we probably don't think it's the hub of agriculture, but there's tremendous amount of food that's being grown there, and 1,670 acres destroyed in this or impacted by it, whether it's structures, land, or equipment, with 31 farmers. And I know there's many more with that. So even Chittenden County impacted by this flood. We are offering resources for testing the soil. Our farmers want to make sure their soil is safe before they have to replant. UVM Extension is helping with that. It's a free soil test. That resource is on our page as well, so helping with that. Something also to keep in mind as we go forward, you're going to hear from some of your constituents about feed for animals and livestock. It has rained so much that we are going to have issues with feed, I believe, quality feed, whether the corn has been underwater for a period of time and cannot recover, and also with forages, with hay. You're going to hear from some of your equine community. The horse community is going to need good quality dry hay, and it may be impacted by that. So that's something that we're going to be thinking about as we move to the fall and winter, making sure we have adequate resources to feed our animals, and we may have to turn to out of state to get some of that. As you know, we were right in the middle of our produce season. Many of those crops were just coming in. That is the income of our farmers. Many of our farmers in the produce world lost their crops just as they were coming in. There is some hope that they might be able to replant, but that's unlikely for a number of those. Secretary Curley mentioned the $20 million GAP program that's just kicking off. Agriculture will be eligible for that program. More details next week, but agriculture is business. It's farming is business. So they will be included in that $20 million program. Wait for the details on that. And I think that's what I have for sort of the update on agriculture. If you hear something, if a constituent has a question, please reach out to me or email us, call us. You know how to reach us. Agriculture really important because they're feeding us. We want to make sure that they stay viable, and it's going to be a difficult time over the next few months, particularly with so much debris on farmland as well, and the cleanup and so forth. But anything you can do to support our farmers, whether that's going to a farmer's market, whether it's going to a retail operation and buying Vermont, or hopping on the internet and buying some Vermont products, that would be very helpful to our community right now. And thank you for your leadership through this. We're going to need your support as we move forward through this, another event through Vermont over the next few months. Thank you.
Great.
And I think we're going to go to Human Services Secretary. I believe she's up.
Yes, we are. Secretary Samuelson, if you're with us, what we're going to start transitioning to for folks is what are some immediate needs that you can help direct your constituents to, whether there are marks, where to get food, shelter, health and safety during cleanup, and unemployment insurance. So Secretary Samuelson, if you could kick us off.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Jenny Samuelson. For those of who I don't know, I'm the secretary for the Agency of Human Services. And thank you for being here to get out the word to Vermonters about those things that are currently available to them. During this event, we recognize that people's needs, particularly in the areas of housing, food, and healthcare. And I'm going to go through some of the insights into what's been available and what will be available. As we go along, we're going to post in the chat where you can access more information on each of these programs so that you have the websites and the phone numbers. To get started, I want to assure that everyone is aware of the multi-agency resource centers, or the resource centers that are being set up across the state. Many of the resources that we're going to go through today and talk about are available on site at the resource centers, which serve as a one-stop location where the public and private organizations come together to provide assistance to those who've been affected by the disasters. Again, phone numbers for the specific programs will be put in the chat as we go, but for the information on the marks and generally, you can go to vermont.gov/floods. So the resources centers really provide meals and water from the Red Cross, free personal protective equipment, or PPE, specifically masks and gloves, water kits for testing well water, cleaning kits, assistance finding and navigating federal and state resources, and mental health and some basic medical services. These centers have been ongoing around the state. 3 of them are open each day, and so far they've been in Barrie, Ludlow, Woodstock, Johnson, and Londonderry this week. Upcoming over the next few days, we have a resource center in Barton today, Saturday, at the Memorial Building, in Barrie today, Saturday, and Sunday at the Barrie Auditorium, in Wardsboro today, Saturday, and Sunday at the elementary school, in Johnson on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday at the elementary school, in Ludlow on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at the community center, and in Cambridge on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at the elementary school. I went through those very quickly. We'll post that information in the chat. It's also available on an ongoing basis on the emergency management website, as well as by calling 211. Earlier, FEMA also mentioned that more permanent and more comprehensive sites are opening in the Waterbury Armory and the Bloom, the state office building in Rutland. Starting today, these are permanent sites that provide more federal resources with availability to help individuals navigate the application process. With the declaration of Orange County and Caledonia County for individual assistance, we're working with community leaders in that area to assess and establish additional resource centers in those areas. Again, to get a comprehensive list of the resource centers, you can go on the emergency management website, or you can call 211. And I understand that Kendall is also flagging them for local legislators as they're being announced. So transitioning to resources that have been available for sheltering. For individuals and families who need temporary shelters, shelters have been available across the state for anyone who needs them, regardless of the reason. For the majority of the response, there have been over 1,000 beds available throughout Vermont in cooperatively run state and Red Cross shelters. And in an average night, there have been less than 60 beds currently in use. Additionally, there have been local shelters that have been established and set up by local organizations. And there are shelters that have been on standby across the state in case they're needed. This means that they're available to be opened up within an hour and they're geographically distributed across the state. There's been, again, I want to reinforce, there's been significant sheltering capacity for anyone who has needed it, and they have used them. There also has been case managers on site and available to help folks navigate through housing transitions at each of these shelters. As the census of the shelters gets down to 0 in areas, we're planning on beginning to return them to standby, and you'll see this happening throughout the state. Again, throughout the emergency, shelters have been available for anyone who needs them, regardless of their circumstance. And as of today, there are still 2 state-run shelters that remain open in Barry and Johnson, with 33 people actively using them. To get more information on the shelters, individuals can call 211 or go to the Red Cross's website. In addition, then, FEMA has a text line which is available in English or Spanish, the details of which will be in the chat for individuals, and that will send them back the locations of the shelters. As we think about the longer term, individuals whose homes have been damaged to the point that they're not livable for a period of time, I want to remind everyone of existing resources that we have in the state. The Department for Children and Families has the General Assistance Program, which can provide a hotel room for up to 84 days through the Catastrophic Needs Program. And that's been something that's been an ongoing and available resource, and we're seeing individuals and families access that. We're also working with our federal partners on a housing recovery plan for those who have damaged or lost their homes. The state will leverage these programs for individuals who have needs and have reported damage through 211. If there is anything that you take away from today, I've heard everyone mention this, we need everyone to report the damages that they have, regardless of how large or how small. If it feels small, it helps to meet the thresholds for eligibility and provide us the data that we need to target our resources. In addition to housing and sheltering, we've heard that there are people who have needed access to food resources. This has really been limited to isolated and specific areas and situations. We've identified needs where there have been disruptions in transportation, where individuals have lost their vehicles, where people don't have a place to prepare their food because their kitchen has been damaged or destroyed, or where their food has been destroyed. In addition, in 3 communities, we saw that there were grocery stores that closed. We've been working with those grocery stores to open back up, and Hardwick has done so, and we'll continue to work with the others. For those who are in immediate need of food resources, there are food shelves across the state. Those can be accessed through the Vermont Food Bank, and we'll put the link to that in the side chat. We've seen a large number of people who have lost the ability for food in the central Vermont area. And I want to make everyone aware that we are bringing back the partnership that we had during the pandemic through the Everyone Eats program across the state to help meet that need across the state. We're also partnering with Hunger Free Vermont, who is helping us to coordinate an influx of resources specifically to the central Vermont area of state and local volunteers to help meet their feeding needs. And so those are coming in and are on the ground already. For those whose economic situation has changed due to the flooding, I want to remind you of some existing resources that we have in Vermont. These include 3 Squares Vermont, which will help to provide financial resources to provide food, the Meals on Wheels program, which serves older Vermonters and those with disabilities by delivering food to their homes, and the WIC program, which serves families with children up to age 5 and those who are pregnant in order to provide them with food. There's also the Commodities Food program through the Food Bank for individuals who are 60 years and older. For those who are already accessing those programs, we've heard that they've lost their food due to the flooding. If they contact the 3 Squares program or the WIC program, because their food has been destroyed, we can help them replace that food. And so I strongly encourage that to happen. In addition to shelter and food, we've heard that some Vermonters are struggling with to meet their health care needs, particularly around prescriptions. We're aware that people who are enrolled in Medicaid insurance for their insurance have lost their prescriptions in the flooding, and we're able to replace those for individuals if they call Vermont Health Connect or link up with Vermont Health Connect. If individuals have insurance other than Medicaid, we strongly encourage them to reach out to their insurance providers, and typically they can find that information on how to reach out to them on the back of their insurance card. In addition, there are federal resources for individuals who've experienced disaster-related medical or dental expenses, and we'll put the link on how to access those in the chat. Finally, I would encourage anyone who missed the press event yesterday. Commissioner Hawes was on speaking about the resilience and the recovery for mental health, and she has some very poignant resources and words of wisdom there. But we know that individuals are experiencing stress from loss of homes, from increased work for our first responders and for others, and simply survivor's guilt and a sense of helplessness. If people are struggling due to what's happening on the ground, we strongly encourage them to use the crisis line 988. It's normal to be struggling at these times, or to text 741-741 to get additional supports. For all of the resources that I've just spoken about, there's, in addition to in the chat, if you're not catching it there, we have them listed with other agency information at vermont.gov/flood for more comprehensive information. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Levine, who is going to talk about flood safety and recovery.
Thanks. And thank you all for being here today, listening, and for all you're doing to help bring important information and resources to people in Vermont. I know there's a lot to understand and absorb on many critical topics, but I'll be as brief as possible. My highest priority in terms of health and safety is to make sure people know how to protect themselves as they're cleaning up. People may be at risk not only of injury, but also of being exposed to contaminants in the water and air and to mold. This creates the potential for breathing problems, skin irritations, and allergic reactions. We don't recommend testing for mold in homes. People should assume any home that has been flooded and closed up for days has mold. So we want to encourage Vermonters who are cleaning up to protect themselves by wearing an N95 mask, gloves, and eye protection whenever possible. And now, thanks to the state's supply of personal protective equipment from the pandemic, we'll be able to offer this equipment, such as respirators and gloves, at certain locations around the state. For cities, towns, nonprofits, and community organizations, as well as authorized groups of volunteers, PPE can be obtained at specific points of distribution, pods. These pods are located in Morrisville, Barton, White River Junction, Chester, and Middlesex. The sites are open from 9 to 5. Pods are not open to the general public, but individuals can get PPE at the flood resource centers you just heard about, known as MARCs. And those locations can be found at vem.vermont.gov/flood/MARC. Now, the Health Department website, which most of you are quite aware of, healthvermont.gov, now has a /flood section, and it has 2 important fact sheets covering these topics: returning to your home after a flood and mold after a flood. You can print these out to share or post in shared spaces. I'm aware of representatives walking them door to door, actually, to people who have been too busy or do not have power to connect with the internet. These are all available in multiple languages as well. Our messaging emphasizes that children, people with breathing problems, and people with weakened immune systems should avoid helping cleaning up after a flood. The Health Department is also strongly urging that anyone who has a private well or spring that is in a flooded area should assume their drinking water is contaminated. That means don't drink or use the water for cooking, baby formula, washing food, or brushing teeth until you can have it tested. We're offering free drinking water test kits for anyone who uses well water and was impacted by the flooding, so they can check for bacteria, chemicals, or other contaminants. People can get test kits at the MARCs or by calling our public health laboratory at 802-338-4724 or at one of our 12 local health offices. These can be found on healthvermont.gov/local. The kits can also be returned to local health offices. People will receive guidance with results on next steps to take to make sure their water is safe to drink. And speaking of our local health offices, several of those that are in the flood-ravaged regions are offering tetanus shot clinics for those who are either overdue or who have sustained recent injuries that they have not sought care for. Finally, please continue to urge caution around rivers, lakes, and streams. Yes, we've had some nice days, but as today is proving, rain continues to be a threat, even in non-disaster circumstances. Debris, generally strong currents, changes under the water's surface, and contaminants like fuel, microorganisms, and wastewater runoff can be a risk to anyone. And we still expect, unfortunately, to see cyanobacteria blooms as the summer continues. So please stay away from any natural waters that are not calm and clear. With rain events every 48 hours, none of these waters can be deemed free of these potential dangers at this time. All of the information I've discussed is available at healthvermont.gov/flood. And before I turn it over to the next speaker, I would like to double down on what Secretary Samuelson discussed regarding stress and the toll on one's emotional and mental health. Please help spread the word that anyone who's struggling can call the crisis helplines she noted. Now I'd like to turn it over to Commissioner Harrington regarding labor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your own schedules and helping your communities to hear a few words from all of us today. Today, I'm going to talk about unemployment and disaster unemployment assistance. As you may know, the Department of Labor announced yesterday that federal disaster unemployment assistance benefits will be available to Vermonters left without work due to severe flooding that occurred in Vermont beginning July 7th. The Biden administration and Federal Emergency Management have declared those 6 counties already listed, Chittenden, Lamoille, Rutland, Washington, Windham, and Windsor counties as initial federal disaster areas, which is key to accessing DUA benefits. And obviously, with the addition of Caledonia and Orange County, those counties will also become eligible for DUA. Under this declaration, individuals living, working, or scheduled to work in these counties may be eligible for disaster unemployment assistance. This includes independent contractors, those who are self-employed, and agricultural workers, along with others who may not qualify for traditional unemployment insurance benefits. When or if more counties are identified over the coming days and weeks, we will be issuing additional press releases to the public announcing the additional counties coming online. Individuals seeking assistance through the DUA program must first file for regular unemployment insurance benefits. As part of the application process, claimants should indicate that their employment was impacted by the disaster. The Department of Labor will determine if the claimant is eligible for regular unemployment first, as required by FEMA. If the claimant is deemed ineligible for regular unemployment insurance, the applicant will be provided with the DUA application. Eligible Vermonters can collect benefits for the weeks during which they meet the necessary program criteria. Under the DUA program guidance, individuals in the initial counties have until August 21st, 2023 to file. It's essentially 30 days from the day after the press release or announcement goes out from us. The press releases we send out actually have approval from the U.S. Department of Labor and from FEMA directly, and that starts the timeline. We do have the ability to extend or adjust timelines to put them in sync with one another as more counties come online. The first payable week of benefits has been identified as the week of July 9th through the 15th. Examples of eligibility for DUA include the claimant was injured in the disaster and is unable to work, whether they are employed or self-employed. The claimant's workplace was damaged, destroyed, or not in operation as a result of the disaster. The claimant's transportation to work is not available as a direct result of the disaster. The claimant cannot get to their job because they travel through an impacted area or are unable to do so as a direct result of the disaster. The claimant was about to begin work, but the job no longer exists as a direct result of the disaster. And most of the claimant's income comes from the areas affected by the disaster, whether they work for themselves or an employer, and their business is adversely impacted as a direct result of the disaster. There have been questions about whether or not the individual has to live in the impacted county or the employer has to be in the impacted county or a designated county. It depends either way. So depending on the reason for not being able to work, whether it's the employer who's closed or the individual who can't get to work, that the reason has to be in a designated county. So if the employer is in the designated county and is not open, then that person would qualify. Conversely, if the individual lived in the designated county and was unable to get to work because they had to relocate or they lost their vehicle due to the disaster, then again, they would be eligible because they live in the designated county. Individuals interested in disaster unemployment assistance can find more information online at our website, labor.vermont.gov/DUA, or by calling our UI Claimant Assistance Center at 877-214-3330. This page, the web page also includes information about language access. Additionally, our department's workforce development team has been in the field at the multi-agency resource centers, handing out supplies and providing information about workforce services and DUA. Our teams are also operating our job centers across the state and will be involved at the disaster recovery centers. And that's all I have for my update. I think next is question and answer. Kendall?
Yes, thank you for bringing us home there, Commissioner Harrington. Before we move to Q&A, and I realize that we just put a lot of information out there. Again, if there's something you didn't quite catch and you want to know more about, I think everyone here should have my email address. Many of you have my phone number. Reach out. I will get you in the right place if there was something that piqued your interest and you want to reiterate those website links or finer details. But before we open up to Q&A, if there's one thing that we want you all to walk away with, hopefully this has been impressed upon a couple of times now, which is reporting damage to 211. Even if your constituent says, I can fix it myself, or it's not that bad, or it was a little bit of a problem, but it's fine now. That is what's going to help us leverage the most federal funding. We'd really like you guys to walk away with that and help us promote that. And I think Chief of Staff Gibbs, if you're still on, might want to put a finer point to that message, and then we'll open it up to Q&A.
Yeah, I'll be super brief. That point is very, very important. It is important for the currently undesignated counties. In particular, we need your help getting people to report at vermont211.org. There's a very simple web form that they have to fill out. It takes 10 minutes or less. It's not complicated. And we are finding that a lot of people, even in the both designated and undesignated counties who have damage, are like, I don't want to take something away from my neighbor, but that's not what this is for. This is cumulative impact that triggers the federal funding doors to open. So that's extremely important for us to get this designation work done. We need your help on that. The other reason it's important to not, you can't just slack off on the 211 thing if you have a designated county, because we're working with the congressional delegation on the supplemental appropriations process. So think the Federal Budget Adjustment Act. That process really begins in mid-August. And in order to make a very strong case for supplemental federal appropriations for our recovery, we need to be able to point to the largest possible number of damage, the largest possible amount of damage. So that reporting, even in your designated counties, that has not been done, needs to get done so that we have the biggest possible number to show Washington when we go in and ask for what's effectively a budget adjustment in the federal budget. So, and again, that work will begin at the congressional delegation level in just a couple of weeks. So the push is on to get these damages reported, even if it's what people think is something minor that they can take care of themselves. And with that, Kendall, it's all yours.
Great, thank you. We also have leadership from our Agency of Natural Resources, our Department of Taxes, our Department of Mental Health, and many other agencies on that didn't present, depending on what sort of information folks are seeking. So I see a few hands, and I'm going to go, I think, in the order, at least they're appearing on my screen. So Rep. McFawn, followed by Rep. Donahue.
Thank you, Kendall. I'm a little confused on something. I thought that we should be telling people to go to Vermont 211 first with any claims or problems that they have to get things started, especially with FEMA. But I just heard that the request should come first through the local community disaster manager. So which one is it that they should go to first?
Sorry, I was muted. I think there's a difference here, but thank you, Commissioner Morrison. Feel free to jump in.
No problem. I think that there's two streams of information being conflated here, sir. The 211 reports are to report damage to your property, your vehicles, your driveway, anything that got damaged because of the flood. And you will also end up talking to FEMA and filing in their process. So that is about personal property, and for us to be able to document the damage done so that we can get more federal assistance. Totally different stream over here. When a municipality has a need related to the storms, perhaps they have exceeded their ability to fix a major roadway, or they have no access to a grocery store, you name it. All the needs that are percolating in a community need to be brought to local leadership Each community has an emergency management director that is a designated person. They usually have alternates as well. And the local leadership will triage and prioritize the requests. And once the community has determined that they've exhausted the ability to solve the problem on their own or piggyback on a state contract, then they raise those issues to the State Emergency Operations Center, where we can kick in some supports. So one stream that you were talking about, sir, is about personal property that's damaged. And the other stream we were talking about is collective needs in a community.
Thanks.
Rep Donahue, then Rep Troiano.
Thanks. And these are broad questions. I'll ask offline about a lot of specific ones that seem to be beyond this report. But on the 211 and the huge emphasis that's being placed on it, and I certainly understand it in terms of the statewide resource applications and so forth. I'm hearing as I go door to door, it's not accessible. People can't get through. Not everybody has computers, so they're trying to call and they're just getting busy. But more importantly, that does not equate to their registration with FEMA. And so on an individual level, if they think 211 is the thing they've got to do, they're going to get lost in terms of the deadline for the FEMA registration, which may be much more critical to covering their losses. And then I have a second part to that if you want to wait for.
Sure, I can take that one as well. So 211 has been beefed up considerably in the last 7 days. We have provided, there was help that was brought in through the AmeriCorps Vista program to handle the influx of phone calls that is way beyond the normal resources of 211. As of today, we added 11 more volunteers to handle not just the phone calls, but also the online reporting. We also worked with our Agency of Digital Services to create an automated transfer of information. And that's why we're really focusing on the online reports, because anything that's entered online, we can automatically pull. And our FEMA partners will have visibility into the people that have reported damage. And they call people and say, we see you reported damage. We'd like to come do a home assessment. So it does not trigger a FEMA application. The homeowner still has to tell FEMA, yeah, I want to engage with you. I want, to sign up for your programs. But there is visibility under the umbrella of the SEOC, FEMA, the Red Cross, 211, everybody is working together to the greatest degree possible to share information so that people don't fall through the crack that you just mentioned. But FEMA does have visibility into the people that are reporting claims or reporting damage on Vermont 211.
Okay, thanks. I mean, that's still not going to cover all the gaps if they don't know they have to register with FEMA, because my folks they can't live in their homes. They're not there. If somebody comes knocking on the door, they won't be reached. But the second part of the question is is whether or not if somebody gets an early FEMA payment because they've registered quickly, does that become a barrier if they have later discovered losses or costs? Can they reapply for further assistance? Because we're running into that as a question almost immediately because of folks who are just now discovering that they're going to have to pay lot costs, even if they can never return because they haven't yet had the resources to be able to haul the trailer away. And so until the demolished trailer is hauled away, they're going to have to keep paying rent, which may or may not be reimbursable as an expense at all.
I'm going to defer to my colleagues at FEMA for that because that's a pretty specific FEMA question.
Yeah, so for FEMA assistance, there's no need to register more than once. You will register that one time. If there is an unmet need that comes up, our recommendation would be to call the helpline, that 1-800-621-FEMA 3362, and let people know what that unmet need is. And every applicant is different, every situation is different. So we want to make sure that those folks are getting that message to call and keep us updated as the recovery process continues.
Thank you, Rep. Troiano, then Rep. Mahali.
Thank you, and thanks, Kendall, for handling all this information and whatnot. So, I know a rather well-attended meeting in Hardwick on Wednesday night. The question came up about folks living right along the river losing considerable amounts of property when the river went over its banks and actually eroded the banks to a point where some folks have lost not only their homes, but a considerable amount of acreage, which is now just useless and not underwater particularly, but part of the river actually. So I'm wondering what kind of assistance that may qualify for.
I would invite any official on the line that knows the answer to that to please weigh in. Otherwise, we might have to get back to you, Rep. Troiano.
Okay. Don't all jump in at once, right? As they say.
Chelsea?
Yeah, absolutely. So in regards to the home itself, that is what FEMA would be looking at for our individual assistance program. The structure of the home, it would not include things like fences, outbuildings. It's really that primary residence.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Just a few other items. Vehicle damage. There were a number of homes in Hardwick in which vehicles parked in the yard had floated away and are really now useless. That is part of damage that qualifies, I understand.
So our transportation assistance through the individual's assistance program. So that is something that would be looked at on a case-by-case basis. But again, we're really talking about that minimal assistance. So, it has to meet all of the state's licensing requirements, and it would typically be one vehicle per household.
Okay, interesting. And just one more thing for Dr. Levine, the only pharmacy in Hardwick is closed permanently at this point, which means that folks looking for medication have to travel to Morrisville, which is it takes them across Route 15, which is partially washed out, and over to St. Johnsbury, both trips of a half hour or better. Is there any possible way that we can work with that?
Secretary Clauser might be able to respond because I know the governor's recent executive order includes a component regarding pharmacies and access to medication. I don't know if she's still on.
Sorry, it took me too long to get off mute. Yeah, so the most recent executive order does include a provision that waives the rules and requirements to ease the 30-day refills for maintenance medications that are not regulated drugs. So the hope is this should help some folks with access to maintenance drugs. And then with respect to bringing that pharmacy back online, we'll have to get back to you with more update on that. But there is some relief in the most recent executive order to try and reach those people.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep, Rep. Troiano, we're aware of that Walgreens situation, and I'll connect with you.
Yes. Hi, Kendall. It's Carl Dombeck from SBA. I wanted to add a little bit to what my FEMA colleague mentioned about the vehicles as well as the property. First of all, an SBA disaster loan, if they apply and are approved, can be used to relocate if their property was damaged to the point that they really don't want to stay on that piece of land anymore and want to move someplace maybe up the hill away from the river. Vehicles are also included as personal property. I believe ours is one vehicle per licensed driver in the household. It is a loan, it's not a grant, but it can be covered in that regard. If they are hobby vehicles, that's another matter. But we're looking at transportation, and they can certainly be included in an SBA disaster loan. And we also will modify that down the road as conditions change. Perhaps there's more damage. Perhaps the contractors are more expensive than we originally thought because of the facets of supply and demand, whatever, we will work with our borrowers to make sure that they have what they need to recover.
Good. Thank you, everyone, again.
Thank you. Rep. Austin, then Rep. Nickel.
Kendall, could I just add on the vehicles, just while that subject came up? If the vehicles are covered by auto insurance, whether it's personal auto or commercial, and there's comprehensive coverage, there is coverage for flood. So you should be reaching out to your insurance company or agent for those instances and file a claim.
Great. So Rep. Austin, then Rep. Nickel.
Yes, thank you again for this opportunity. In Colchester, which didn't experience a lot of damage, but there is a farm in Colchester with farmers who don't speak English. And I think that is true in Chittenden County. But we have many Vermonters that are non-English speaking. And I think just to hand them a piece of paper is not going to be helpful to them. And I'm wondering, I know there are applications on phones where you can immediately get to an interpreter in that language, in whatever language they speak, to explain how to apply for FEMA or all. It's, you know, it's so complex to me, even being able to speak English. And I'm just wondering how that community of Vermonters is, you know, having the same level of access and opportunities.
Thank you for that question. I'm going to look at Secretary Clauser just for a second, because I know we've been working hard to get our materials translated as quickly as possible. If you go on to many of the websites that I've put in the link, especially our primary flood repository, the very first thing you'll see is those resources translated into, I believe, and Secretary Clauser, correct me if I'm wrong, the 10 most commonly spoken, might be more than that, languages in Vermont. Those website apps that you mentioned are obviously kind of an immediate bridge resource that you can be utilizing. But Secretary Clauser or others whose shops have been working on this, if you want to weigh in, that'd be great.
Sure. Thanks, Kendall. So Kendall pointed you to the flood response, which is translated into 9 languages. At the bottom of that webpage, there's a translation site. And if you click on that, that will take you to all of the different flood response packets of information that can be accessed in the 9 languages most frequently spoken, including American Sign Language. There's also some videos that we're working on to translate some of the items in videos for folks who can't read and need some video assistance to access those documents. I'd have to toss the remainder of your question, though, to FEMA, because I think you're trying to get at what FEMA uses when they're out and contacting folks to assess damage.
Right. And just live interpreters, you know, human interpreters. So again, if it's specific, you know, it's not just a piece of paper. You know, I think that would be very difficult to navigate with just a piece of paper. I mean, how do very different languages in Vermont, people who speak different languages, access a live person to help them communicate with the FEMA person?
Yes, so we do have translation services available to our staff members by phone. It could, you know, we try to do it by phone mainly because we know there may not be service everywhere. So that's their primary mode of communication there. We can also schedule times as well to go out. And if we know there's a specific population or a community that we need outreach in, we will also look through our staff to see if we might have a language speaker that it's native for them, because that's the best way to communicate, right? So we do a lot of that specific outreach as needed. So as you do, you know, identify pockets that might need assistance, just let us know your concerns and we're happy to work with them.
Great. Thank you.
Rep. Nickel, then Rep. Sibilia. And just real quick, several folks for us have a hard stop at 3:30, which obviously we're at 3:32. So I know we didn't probably have as much time for Q&A as folks would have liked. But again, everyone I think knows how to reach me or at least one administration member here. So if something that we shared sparked a question, just shoot us an email or give us a call and we'll get you in the right place. So Rep. Nickel, then Rep. Sibilia.
Yeah, thanks, Kendall, and thanks for everybody for joining. This was a lot of information and it was very helpful. I just had two questions. Kendall, maybe more for you. I was wondering if, I know during Irene, there was a recovery officer, a designated officer, who was kind of an easier point of contact and kind of a czar between us and the fifth floor. And I was just wondering if that was something we were working towards in this case too, or if somebody was in mind.
Are you volunteering, Rep?
No, I am not.
So we are at that kind of transition point between response and recovery. Our cabinet members here are really experts that we have in a lot of the areas and have immediate access to resources. It's something that we will continue to contemplate. And again, if we'll continue to contemplate that. It's come up, it's been on our radar. It's something that has been raised. So potentially more to come there.
And then I got some contacts mostly today and yesterday from some of my towns about the debris management plan. I didn't really hear that talked about today. I was curious if there was, they've gotten some communication about a plan of telling homeowners just to move debris towards the road and then having towns or solid waste districts kind of deal with it from there. And they had some concerns about that idea. And I was just curious if there was somebody on that had, or if there was another option being considered in that realm.
Yeah, we definitely, I don't know if Commissioner Morrison or, okay, yep, go ahead.
Got it. So we do have a debris management plan and a team who's working on that, and I can put you in touch directly with them. Generally speaking, the response to the community is that they are supposed to be putting their debris within 10 feet of the right of way and off of private property. And the communities are responsible for picking up that debris. And there's a whole lot more to go with that, but I know we're short on time. So I can have somebody drop a link into the chat here, or you can go direct with me and I will pass your information through to the debris team. But it is it's a big deal. We get it, but it also could be the subject of an entire another hour and a half meeting. So we'll have to go offline with that.
Jason, did you want to weigh in on debris?
Yeah, two quick things. Just to follow up on Ann's question quickly. I just want to be super clear to underscore the commissioner's point. If someone reports damage via Vermont211.org, they just take the 10 minutes and fill out that damage form. We have their address, their name, address, phone number, email, and we coordinate with FEMA to make sure that FEMA connects with them when their county is designated and they become eligible. So we are tracking all of the people that come in through 211 to make sure that they are handed off appropriately into the next phase of the individual assistance process. So there's not a gap that I'm aware of, but if you find one, let us know and we will definitely close it. But my point is, it's not just disappearing into the 211 ether. It's part of our coordinated effort, and that's the point I think the commissioner wanted to make. On debris, if folks need to move their debris near the right of way as instructed over the near term, cleaning and drying is mission one right now. And if a community has trouble handling the amount of debris, that's what we are here for, and we will help them figure it out.
Thank you. I believe Rep. Sibilia is all set for now. So thank you again, everybody, for the time this afternoon. I know it's been a long hour and a half plus. And again, main message is 211. And if you have more questions, get a hold of one of us and we'll definitely get